You know, when we talk about the history of economics, one name usually comes to mind first, right? Adam Smith. But what if I told you the story most of us learned in school is, well, it's missing a huge piece of the puzzle, a piece that's about 1,000 years long. Today, we're going to uncover that forgotten chapter. So let's start with the familiar. We've all heard of Adam Smith, the Scottish philosopher who's pretty much universally called the father of modern economics. And his most famous idea, from his legendary 1776 book, The Wealth of Nations, is of course the invisible hand. It's this idea that when everyone chases their own self-interest, it somehow, almost magically, benefits everyone in society. It's Economics 101. And if you crack open a typical economics textbook, the history of these big ideas usually looks something like this. You start way back with the ancient Greeks, Plato, Aristotle, and then, whoosh, you basically leapfrog over more than 1,000 years of history and land squarely in the Enlightenment with Adam Smith. It leaves this massive, kind of awkward, unexplained void right in the middle.
In fact, this isn't just something we noticed. The famous economist Joseph Schumpeter actually gave it a name in his huge work, History of Economic Analysis. He called it the Great Gap, a period where, if you believe the standard story, humanity just sort of stopped thinking about economics.
But think about that for a second. Does that really make any sense? 1,000 years where nobody had any new thoughts on trade or value or the role of government? It just doesn't add up. And it turns out the real story is so much more interesting.
You see, this gap, it wasn't a gap at all. It was the Islamic Golden Age. This was a time of absolutely incredible scientific discovery, cultural explosion, and intellectual breakthroughs. While Europe was going through the Middle Ages, it was actually Muslim thinkers who were pushing the boundaries of knowledge in everything from medicine to, yes, economics.
And this knowledge didn't just stay put. Oh no, it was on the move. It flowed into Europe through all sorts of channels. You had bustling trade routes where merchants weren't just exchanging silks and spices, but ideas too. You had huge translation centers where brilliant texts were turned into Latin. And yeah, even things like the Crusades and the journeys of travelers and diplomats helped spread these ideas. The world was way more connected than we think. So, you might be thinking, okay, big claim, where's the proof? Well, let's get into it. We're going to look at some core economic concepts, ideas we usually credit to Western thinkers, and see just how far back their roots really go. Some of this stuff is just too striking to be a coincidence. First up, I want you to meet someone you really should have learned about in Econ 101, Ibn Khaldun. He was this absolutely brilliant Tunisian scholar from the 14th century, a historian, a sociologist, a philosopher, and honestly, you can make a super strong case that he was the world's first true economist. We're talking 400 years before Adam Smith was even born. I mean, just look at the scope of his thinking here. The division of labor, that cornerstone of Adam Smith's work, Ibn Khaldun was writing all about it in the 1300s. The labor theory of value, which we usually tie to David Ricardo, yep, Khaldun was on it. He even explored ideas about population and the role of the state that sound a lot like what Malthus and Keynes would write about centuries down the line. It's just an incredible intellectual achievement.
Okay, let's get even more specific. If you've ever taken a class on public finance or paid attention to tax debates, you've probably heard of the Laffer curve. The idea that if you raise tax rates too high, government revenue actually goes down because people stop working or find ways to avoid the tax.
Well, just listen to what Ibn Khaldun wrote way back in 1377. He said that when a government is new, taxation yields a large revenue from small assessments, but as it gets older and greedier, it yields a small revenue from large assessments. That's it. That's the Laffer curve, described perfectly.
Ibn Khaldun laid out this fundamental idea about 600 years, let that sink in, 600 years before Arthur Laffer, the economist who the curve is now named after. And to his credit, Laffer himself acknowledged in 2004 that, yeah, Ibn Khaldun totally got there first. Okay, let's jump back to Adam Smith's most famous example for a second, the pin factory, right? He brilliantly explains that one guy working alone could maybe make one pin a day. But if you get 10 guys and each one specializes in just one small part of the process, together they could churn out tens of thousands. It's the classic example of the division of labor.
Now get ready for this. Almost 700 years before Adam Smith, an 11th century scholar named al-Ghazali used a nearly identical example to explain the exact same idea. Smith used a pin factory, al-Ghazali used a needle factory, and he even broke it down into about 25 different steps. A needle factory, a pin factory, Come on, that is just too close to be a coincidence. It's uncanny.
So, all of this brings us right back to where we started, the invisible hand. The central idea here is that prices should be set naturally, by supply and demand, without the government sticking its fingers in and messing things up. It's the bedrock of free market capitalism. Now check this out. It's an account from the 7th century. People came to the Prophet Muhammad, complaining about rising prices and asking him to impose price controls. He refused. He said, "Prices are in the hands of Allah." Now, many scholars see this as an early expression of free market principles, the idea that prices are set by a natural, almost divine order that humans shouldn't tamper with. In a way, Allah's hand was acting as a kind of invisible hand, a full millennium before Adam Smith. When you put all this evidence together, it really forces us to take out a red pen and rewrite the history books. We have to see that these supposedly Western economic ideas have roots that are so much deeper and more global than we've been led to believe. So the correct timeline of economic thought doesn't have a gap, not at all. It's a continuous, flowing story. It goes from ancient Greece to the incredible contributions of Muslim thinkers, whose work was then translated and built upon by European scholastics, which then led to the mercantilists, and finally to the classical economists like Smith. It all connects. Look, this isn't just about winning a game of historical trivia. This matters. It matters because it reminds us that science and knowledge belong to all of us. It's a shared human heritage. It pushes back against a narrow Eurocentric version of history and proves that progress is always cumulative. We all stand on the shoulders of giants, and those giants came from every corner of the world.
There's a quote from our source material that just sums it all up perfectly. Human civilization should be evaluated as a whole, and the knowledge produced should be regarded as the common property of all humanity. That's really the heart of it, right there.
Uncovering this lost history of economics really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other stories have we been told that are missing a key chapter? What other parts of our incredible shared human history are just sitting there waiting for us to rediscover them?